Thank you. Thank you. Very happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me. It's been a great conference so far. I know it just started, but they've had vegan food, so I'm happy. So thank you, Zach, for that. So I'm going to talk to you today about emotional intelligence for engineers. And because of that, I want to address the elephant in the room. So this is an Angular conference. Who's this lady, and why is she here to talk to us about our feelings? So I just want to confront that head on. So, one, who am I? So I'm a software engineer, and I have been for the past decade. I've worked at a number of different startups in Silicon Valley. I've led engineering teams, including engineering teams that were using Angular. Although when I started using it, it was AngularJS, so I'm still getting used to this whole new terminology thing. Two, every talk at this conference is about how to become an effective developer, how to be more effective at your job. And this talk is no different. I truly believe that emotional intelligence is key to becoming the most effective developer that you can be. And three, this conference is all about inclusion as well, and emotional intelligence is essential if we want to create inclusive environments. So the plan. First, I'm going to talk about what emotional intelligence is in general, why you should care, importantly, and how do you develop it. So I'll start with a confession. I used to be a jerk. So yeah, I have a company now called Compassionate Coding, but it wasn't always this way. I used to be kind of a jerk programmer, which I have written about recently. I wrote this blog post, got some attention on Reddit and whatnot, which was interesting because when you write a post about being a jerk and people are kind of jerks to you about that post, it's kind of an interesting dynamic there. But my point in mentioning this is that to all the negative Nancys and Netties in the audience who are thinking, what is this fluffy soft talk? I could have been sleeping. I understand, and I actually have deep empathy for you, because old April would probably have made fun of this talk and would have been like, oh, like, what's this about? This is stupid. So I have kept you in my heart while I've been writing this talk because I understand your skepticism. Okay, so with all those disclaimers and caveats and everything, emotional intelligence, what is it? I'll tell you what it's not. It is not just being nice. It's not ignoring reason. It's not being fake. It's not being an extrovert, necessarily. I'm an introvert, personally. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage emotions. That sounds kind of vague, so I want to offer some specifics. It includes self-awareness, confidence, empathy, achievement, collaboration, motivation, and conflict management, among other things. You may know it by the term soft skills, and I hate this term. I don't use the word hate very often, but I really do hate the term soft skills. Why? Because softness is also associated with weakness. So we say, oh, he's gone soft, or she's gone soft. Soft is seen as a negative, has a lot of negative connotations. Secondly, it's also sometimes associated specifically with women. So Sears, when they introduced clothing and things targeted at women, they had these commercials. Some of you may remember, some of you are probably too young to remember, but they had the softer side of Sears. And it was all about stuff for women. So I think that when we use terms like soft skills, we're boxing it into these limited viewpoints. So when I was on an airport shuttle yesterday, they had the radio playing and they were talking about some football game that's happening this weekend or something. Anyway, and they talked about this guy, Doug Peterson, a name I'd never heard before. And they said, as soon as I stepped on the shuttle, they were saying, Doug Peterson really has emotional intelligence. He understands that football is not just a tactical game, it's psychological. And I was like, yes, emotional intelligence associated with football. How can anyone call this soft if it's associated with football, like the most aggressive thing that our country has going on right now? So, at least internally. So please, please, please stop calling these soft skills. It's emotional intelligence. It's not people skills. So, and there's also problems with this. So this is from Office Space movie. And he says, I deal with customers so that engineers don't have to. I'm good at dealing with people. I have people skills. And I think a lot of us hear people skills and we think, okay, what does that even mean? And that's not a hard technical skill, whatever. So actually, instead of soft skills, what I propose is that we use this term catalytic skills, because it has that sort of technical sounding thing that I think will be easier for people to digest. So I heard this from Daniel Goleman, and then I heard it in a number of other places, but he was giving a talk at Google actually, and it's on YouTube, one of those tech talks, and he calls them catalytic skills, and what he means by that is that these are foundational skills that will help catalyze everything else that you want to do in your job. So it helps you apply your technical skills, and it helps you acquire new technical skills. So that's what these skills do. I would also offer that we could just call them skills and not differentiate, but I think Kim Creighton's talk tomorrow will cover that, about how important it is, how important these skills really are. So why should you care, to that point? As engineers, why does any of this matter to you? You might not be managers, you might think, I'm good with the machines, why do I have to care about people? So why do software projects fail? So it's hard to find, a lot of data about this, because it's difficult to classify what's a failure, things like that. But just as a starting point, this data comes from the Application Developers Alliance. A few years ago, they did this survey where they asked engineers they surveyed them about what caused their projects to fail. You'll see that some of the biggest reasons here are changing or poorly documented requirements, poor team or organizational management, developer churn, and loss of key talent. So all of those three on the one side, those are all related to people, and they're all things that emotional intelligence can help with. And then way on the end, not insignificant, but still less than the others, immature dev tools and application platforms. But what are we always talking about? Let's build another JavaScript framework. Let's you build this new tool. So we're kind of stuck as engineers in trying to optimize our tools, and we're neglecting this whole other human side, really, and that's really what's causing our projects to fail. So again, we need more data around this, but this is also consistent with anecdotal evidence, so that's why I'm putting this forth. Also, it seems like every week there's a new article about burnout in tech or something like that, and burnout really results when you're not able to manage your emotions, manage your motivation, and deal with the troubling things that you have going on at work. So burnout is another result of this lack of emotional intelligence in tech. So I know we want to think, we go to work, we turn off our emotions, we're perfectly logical, but it's just not true. That's not how it works. I hate to break it to you, but you are not a robot. You work on machines, yes, but you're a human being, and every single human being has emotions that are driving them all the time. Apple CEO Tim Cook said this in a commencement address. I'm not worried about artificial intelligence giving computers the ability to think like humans. I'm more concerned about people thinking like computers. And I think we, as the builders of technology, have a big influence on this. So specifically for engineers, here's some of the things that, the activities that are part of your job that can benefit from emotional intelligence. Giving effective feedback in code reviews. Naming variables, seriously, because naming variables well requires a great amount of empathy. Designing APIs, also big on the empathy. Negotiating with designers. Rallying support for a new tool. If you want to switch from one framework to another, whatever, or you want to upgrade a framework or whatever it may be, or use a new video conferencing tool. I was at a company where we were just trying to introduce a new video conferencing tool, and everybody's emotions got all up in arms about that. So emotional intelligence is important there. Motivating yourself and interviewing candidates. That last one especially has to do with inclusion and whatnot, because when we're better able to speak with people, we can create more inclusive hiring processes that don't rule out people. Also, the Agile Manifesto, I would argue, and I've written about this on my website, about how it's really kind of a way of layering emotional intelligence onto software development, and it's a good first step towards that. So this principle, we welcome changing requirements, even late in development, et cetera, shows empathy, service orientation, adaptability, optimism, initiative. These are all aspects of emotional intelligence. Finally, personal benefits regarding the burnout thing. If you really can improve your emotional intelligence, it can reduce your stress, improve your productivity, create better relationships, and also make you happier. I know that sounds trite or whatever, but it's actually true. Okay, so with all that said, how do you develop it? So I wanted to use a metaphor that's familiar to people in tech. Probably most of you are familiar with the idea of being on call, where if the site goes down or if there's some big problem, you get a notification. Probably not on a device like this, but again, it's a metaphor. So if your site is in trouble, you get a notification, and what do? Well, hopefully you have automated processes that deal with it, but if you actually do need a human to intervene, then you might have something called a runbook. Some of you might call it playbook, whatever. And it's steps you can go through when something bad is happening. What do I check? Should I look at the log files? What should I do? So Distressing emotions like anger, sadness, frustration, all these things, they're kind of like alerts. They're letting us know that something happening in our environment is out of touch with how we want it to be. And if you don't deal with these properly, it's similar to what happens when you get a notification about your systems. Disaster strikes. Or as Daniel Goleman puts it, psychologist Daniel Goleman puts it, out of control emotions can make smart people seem stupid. So I'm sure everyone in this audience would like to think that they're smart, just because that's how developers are, and so clearly you don't want to be stupid because of your emotions. Okay, so the emotional incident runbook is what I would like to present. Steps that you can take whenever you're having an emotion that's distressing. So if you're happy, you don't really need to worry about this. It's more if you're frustrated or if you want to change something. And these are the steps for that. So you slow down. That's the most important step. And I realize there's some irony in that since I'm kind of a fast talker and I'm like, slow down. But it's very important. Slow down. Tend to your needs. And by needs, it could be you're tired, you're hungry. It could also be higher level needs, like you value efficiency, you value fairness, and something in your environment is violating those values. Then you empathize, and then you proceed calmly with the action that you've decided using the above steps. So it actually spells out STEP, making it easy to remember. Slow down, tend to your needs, empathize, proceed calmly. So slow down is the most important one. If you do nothing else, I would say slow down, because I took a meditation class, and this metaphor comes from that, where the monk at the front was saying, your anxious mind is kind of like a jar of water with sediment in it that's been shaken up. And slowing down through meditation, or just through, just literally slowing down, lets the sediment settle to create clarity, both literally in this example, but then also like metaphorically, clarity in your situation. I dropped that meditation class because I thought it was moving too slowly. I still had a lot to learn, but hopefully I've progressed since then. True story. Okay, so here's an example that I use at companies, and I'll read it out because it's kind of hard to read. So, once two developers having a conversation, and it may not sound too unfamiliar to you. So the first says, Alex, I saw that you set the points on a story by yourself again. We're supposed to vote as a team. Alex says, I never agreed to that. The story was just a quick task. What does it matter? We have a process in place, and we're supposed to stick to it. You always do that, bring up process. We waste so much time talking about process. I just want to get things done. And you're always being reckless and breaking things. We have processes in place for a reason. If you can't stick to them, maybe you shouldn't be on this team. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't. Whoa, okay, that escalated quickly. So this is what happens when we don't use emotional intelligence. When we think that we're being purely rational because we're just making rational arguments. We agree to this. No, but actually our emotions are driving what we're actually talking about. So walking through the steps that I mentioned, so slow down, okay, so somebody added points to a story. Hopefully this makes sense without too much explanation, but if you have like Trello or some other issue tracker and you're setting points on the story as a team. So somebody did that. Alex did that. Morgan notices and says, you're not supposed to do that, and they just go back and forth. So if we slow down though, we can take a step back and think, okay, what does each of these individuals value? I specifically use names that can go either way, so use whatever pronoun you would like for these individuals in your head. But one of them, the first one, in blue, is thinking, I really value organization, structure. And why do I value that? Because I want us to be effective in delivering value to the customer. So the person who pointed the story, they value moving quickly, not wasting time in process, and what they see as wasting time in process. Why? So that they can get value to the customer faster. So if you take the time to really work through people's values, see, okay, at the end of the day, they both just want to get value to the customer in the best way possible. So they actually have more in common. So there's no reason for this really hostile exchange because they really have more in common. And so if they can approach it from that point of view, then they can each, very calmly explain what they value, and they can hopefully come to an agreement about, whether it's a compromise or more likely a solution that works for everyone. Like, okay, so we'll have a process in place for if you are avoiding the process. And I realize that sounds horrible probably to engineers, but it's, it's a lot lighter weight than it sounds, right? And you can only come to these new solutions if you slow down and have that open-mindedness. So probably, in addition to slowing down, really the important piece is considering what might the other person be feeling, valuing, and needing. And just taking a moment to consider that will help in every single exchange that you have. And you may think, this sounds like such a waste of time if I have to do this in every single interaction that I have. But I would argue that that exchange that we just looked at, that's not a productive conversation. Nothing was resolved in that conversation. Somebody might end up leaving the team because of that conversation. And by the way, that conversation was based very closely on something that actually happened on a team of mine that I was leading at the time. And it was just as contentious as that. And so conflict actually costs companies, overall, millions of dollars because people are wasting time because they have these unresolved conflicts. So emotional intelligence can help with that. And I think engineers, especially as strong-minded people, can really benefit from that. Okay, so I've given you kind of a starter guide for the emotional incident runbook, but I think this is really an ongoing process. So you can start with these steps, right? But you'll start to notice patterns, like, okay, if I don't get enough sleep the night before, everyone is so annoying at work. And then you sort of say, oh, okay, so maybe I just need more rest before I try to address situations where there's a lot of conflict on the team and whatnot. And I would say, too, it takes practice. So it's really helpful if you can cultivate a growth mindset in this situation. But what that means is, acknowledge where you are. Like, we all have some level of emotional intelligence, because we can do basic tasks, and we at least motivated ourselves enough to, get up this morning, right? Those of us who are here. So to some degree, you have some level of emotional intelligence. So we're all at some place, and it's all about getting better. So that's what the growth mindset says. It's not, oh, I'm an introvert, I can't deal with people, or I don't have to deal with people because I'm an engineer. It's more, I want to be more effective, and I realize that these are skills that can be grown with applied effort, and so I'm going to do that. So on, a very clear way, this cultivating emotional intelligence, reading about it, like Daniel Goleman's work is great. There's a great website, the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. They have a website that's all about applying these kinds of ideas in the workplace. Highly recommend it. So you'll become more effective as individuals. You'll have more effective teams. And that's great. We're helping the bottom line. We're becoming happier people. But really, to tie this to a bigger picture thing, I would say the problems that we're facing in tech, and we are facing a lot of problems, from the lack of inclusion and diversity, of course, is one, but also just the fact that we're building a lot of products that don't consider the human element, the long-term consequences of some of the things we're building, and the burnout and anxiety and stress and all that stuff. It's not a very healthy environment. I think tech overall is pretty toxic. So all these problems we're facing all relate to this lack of concern for human beings. And that's what emotional intelligence can help with, is understanding how human beings operate and what we can do to optimize the process. So I like to include this quote from Karen Armstrong because I think it sums up the current status quo in tech, which is, if it is not tempered by compassion and empathy, reason can lead men and women into a moral void. And I would argue that this is what we have in tech right now. We've been so focused on being rational and using logic and reason, and we've neglected the human consequences for both what we're doing in terms of what we're building, but also how we're treating each other. Because if on a team, we talk about artificial intelligence being empathetic. If the people building the artificial intelligence aren't empathetic, then how are they going to create empathetic AI, right? It doesn't make sense. And even on a daily basis, do you want to come to work and be frustrated and tired, pretty often? I didn't like that, and that seems sadly common in tech. So that is what I have for you. So thank you for listening. Thank you for having me. And again, thank you so much to Zach. When he reached out about this and talked about putting inclusion really into the heart of the whole conference, I was so excited. I've been looking forward to this for months. So I'm so happy to be here, and thank you all for listening. And here's my website, compassionatecoding.com, where I write about this kind of stuff and I help teams with it. I have a newsletter if you want to subscribe, and if you want to email me directly, I'm just april@compassionatecoding.com. I'd be happy to hear from all of the skeptics on exactly why you don't think emotional intelligence is important. Those would be my favorite emails, so please send those my way. Other than that, thank you very much.